I started looking at the numbers and realized that from the three houses I bought out of that 1031, I basically kept not my cash flow, but my overall cash growth, we'll call it, like the bottom line basically stayed the same. My cash flow went down a little bit, but once you do property appreciation, the 5 areas of growth that Greg talks about, I can't name them all right now, but those all together basically equal what I was getting off of this one property and probably a little bit more. And it's only going to grow from there.
So number one, I want to get into those two concepts. Cashing in on a seller's market and then not paying the penalty as a buyer. I want to get into the 1031. Yep. You said something that really just perked me up on my chair, because Greg and I literally this week were just talking about this idea of cash growth and as a category of investing, right? Like you hear about cash flowing portfolios, you hear about growth portfolios, but an idea of a cash growth portfolio is something that we're just like, why aren't people talking about this? So I would love to hear what you meant by this idea of cash growth, not necessarily cash flowing right now, but cash growth. Tell me more about that thought.
Well, I think I just recognized I turned 40. We talked about this earlier. I have my 40th coming up. So I still have, a fairly long runway of my years that I'm going to be working. And I really love what I do. So I don't plan to not be doing it. So I don't need the cash flow right now for my everyday life. It's just me. I've got a dog. I don't have a lot of capital outlay just for my day to day. And so I was okay with some of that growth in my net worth coming from, mortgage payoff, appreciation. So it's still when I say cash growth, what I really mean is my net worth is increasing, but I'm not experiencing it in cash flow necessarily, but it's building up my nest egg, net worth, whatever you want to call it, value of what I own and the assets. And they're going to be there for me to leverage later, 10, 15 years when I need them and want them. And, when some point I'll pivot out of what I'm doing now or whatever it is. So it's that overall accumulation of wealth, not just in cash flow. The little house was great. The cash flow was amazing. I was shocked at what it could produce, but I also recognized that because of the way the market, it was probably peaking and it was going to pull back. Also, the short-term rental, the community that I was in had started to kind of crack down. They weren't disallowing them, but it was becoming more difficult. At that point, there was a lot more competition. And so I knew if I wanted that overall growth of my portfolio to continue, I needed to move it into assets that I had a bigger leverage, with. And so that's basically what I did. I basically took that house and doubled my leverage. And again, didn't get as much cash flow out of it, but that's okay because I don't need that right now.
I love it, man. That's really well explained, right? Like for us, it was this idea of if you can, like the bonds aren't necessarily going to increase your cash flow growth, but it creates cash flow today, or, highly cash flowing real estate that doesn't have as much growth also kind of does the same thing. And then this idea of just understanding that when you look at what age you are, you look at where you want to be when you retire, and knowing that what you are worth is less important than like how much cash flow you're going to get from it at that point, totally. The cash flow tomorrow instead of today kind of thing. Yep. And investing to maximize that and trying to figure out what's the least amount that I can put in right now in order to maximize that output instead of what is it? How can I maximize net worth versus how can I maximize future cash flow? I think it's a really transcendent thing that we're going to get really loud about. I'm really pumped that you brought it up, man, because we're just literally just talking about it.
Well, and it also, I think one big thing for me is it allowed me to move out of when I was younger and I had the extra time, managing the properties was no big deal. But as I've moved in other areas of my life, my business have grown and require more of my time. It allowed me to move those assets into something with JWV where it's hands off, which is great. You joked earlier about becoming a Croatian national. If in 15 years I want to move over there and retire, this can all be these assets here producing income that I don't have to worry about. I don't need the fact that I'm not stateside doesn't matter, right? And to me, that's just like super appealing. But it's also still real estate, which I understand and appreciate. And, that was what I think it kind of drove some of the JWV. I was working with Brandon at the time. I think it drove him a little crazy because I was like, can you send me all the floor plans? I want to know, I know they talk about them as widgets. Yeah. But for me, I'm like, it's an asset. It's a hard asset that I know and I want to understand. And in 15, 20 years, so I analyzed all the plans, and, I will say all the plans, I feel like they've done a great job laying out. The flow works well with them. I think they're going to be appealing in 15, 20 years if I ever decide to sell them.